My history with the Final Fantasy franchise can be best described as long but inconsistent, and started with Final Fantasy VIII. Though I haven't played every single installment in the series, what I can say for sure is that every time I heard that there is a new Final Fantasy game coming out, it always got my pulse racing, and filled me with excitement in anticipation of the latest entry. And there's a good reason for that. Whatever the topic of the new game might be, whatever world the developers put us in, you can always rest assured that it will be an excellent game and a true highlight in the current console generation, as it has been for more than 25 years. I remember it vividly. September of 2020, me and my buddies on Discord watching the second PlayStation 5 showcase, eagerly waiting for the price reveal and the date when the console can be ordered, as well as checking out new trailers for the upcoming games. The PlayStation 5 was already sold to me prior to this presentation, as I knew I wanted to catch up on all the exclusive titles from the previous generation that I unfortunately missed. And I should say that I still have quite a steep hill to climb in this regard, but that's a story for another day. And then,
suddenly it appeared.
And from that moment onwards, I knew that Persona 5 is definitely not the only reason why I want to get a PS5. Prior to playing Final Fantasy 16, I purposely did not watch any more trailers, didn't play the demo, didn't read any articles, as I wanted to enter this world completely blind and let everything sink in as the journey went on. So when I finally got my hands on the full game, everything else had to be put on the sideline, including the Tears of the Kingdom video, as I really wanted to play it. And after almost 40 hours, I'm ready to share my opinion and try to explain why I think it's one of the defining titles of this generation. Regardless of where the story takes place, Final Fantasy has always been known for having deep, well-written, and somewhat believable world that you get sent into. And Final Fantasy 16 is no exception. When I saw the PEGI 18 sign on the box, I was a bit surprised. What? A Final Fantasy game with a mature rating? What's the meaning of this? And there's a good reason for my surprise, as Final Fantasy 16 is reportedly only the third game in the franchise to receive this rating, with the previous two being Final Fantasy Type 0 and Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. And Final Fantasy 16 is the first mainline game intended only for mature audiences. This was achieved by a drastic change in the setting that allowed the writers to deliver a darker story, where there's hardly any place for compassion and kindness. Instead, we get a cruel, unforgiving world of Alistia, ruled by heartless leaders, and cursed with a plague called the Blight that slowly devours the land. When traversing through this world, it felt to me that the developers drew inspiration from quite a lot of different media sources to make a believable dark fantasy world based on medieval Europe. The whole economy and livelihood of Alistia relies on the power of the Mother Crystals, huge crystal mountains that are placed across the two main continents, Ash in the east and Storm in the west. These crystals allow anyone to use magic in order to perform different tasks, from generating water to forging steel. This reliance on the power of the crystals is responsible for both the technological achievements of the country and its downfall. The endless war between the nations of Alistia, as well as the constant abuse of its resources, has led to a global crisis and the spread of the aforementioned blight that turns a once prosperous land into ash. Slavery, murder, abuse, and many other crimes are common in Alistia, especially for those who were born with the power to wield magic. These people, known as bearers, suffer a fate at times worse than slaves, being treated as anything but people, and forced to work their magic until their crystal curse turns their bodies to stone. There are also those with the power to control the elements of nature and the divine beasts known as Eikons that represent them. They're called dominants, and their magical potency goes way beyond that of a regular bearer. The dominants are both feared and despised by many, as their power and ability to take form of the beasts makes them a force to be reckoned with. Imagine a single man or a woman being able to wipe out an entire country if they felt like it. Each nation has their own dominant, and it's mostly their presence that keeps the fragile balance of the world. The best analogy would probably be tactical nuclear weapons, but this time everybody has these toys to play with. Despite the current state of affairs, Valistia is a majestic place to be in, and I've had so much fun exploring this world and its many locations. The level of detail is simply stunning, and I would say that this is the first time when a game feels like a true next-gen experience. Sure, Final Fantasy XVI is not an open-world game in the traditional sense of this word, but I'd rather have a well-polished and thought-out product than a half-assed excuse of a game world, littered with pointless question marks all over the map. Valistia has a very diverse landscape, ranging from wild forests connecting towns, to sizzling deserts with occasional settlements located near the oasis. Every place has its distinct vibe, and details that make them believable and amazing to look at. But it's not only the landscape and the weather that impressed me. When it came to combat and the big battle scenes, I was treated to arguably the flashiest, most grandiose sequences that I've ever seen. The amount of action on the screen and the different particles, lighting and other effects rendered at the same time were simply overwhelming, to the point where it was hard to focus on everything that was going on. All of this is complemented by a beautiful soundtrack, matching the action on the screen beat for beat. And it's not very often that such a brilliant combination of visual and audio design comes around to sweep you up, absorb in the world, and only let go after the final credits have rolled. What also quite impressed me was the performance. Even though I chose graphical fidelity over frame rate, it rarely felt that the game was struggling to deliver a smooth experience with frame drops only in the most intense battles, when I used multiple abilities at the same time. I am honestly yet to see a better looking and sounding game on this generation of hardware, and I'm happy that the developers decided to focus solely on the PS5, despite the PS4 version being in the works. Final Fantasy XVI is simply gorgeous, and a game that I wanted to continue playing until the very end. Speaking of gameplay, Final Fantasy XVI is a far cry from what I'm used to when it comes to Final Fantasy games. Gone is the turn-based combat, no more rigorous inventory, skill and party management, and their place is a very flashy, streamlined, real-time combat with minimum items and abilities to go through. You'll be spending a good chunk of the time slashing at enemies and chaining your moves into a string of combos, like you would do in a Devil May Cry game. All in all, there are 3 types of gear: sword, belt, and armbands, 3 amulet slots, and 3 Akon abilities that you can use at the same time, and are free to switch around to suit your playstyle. Of course, there are many options when it comes to choosing the skill set, especially at the later stages in the game, but you definitely won't spend hours on end scrolling through the endless list of skills and gear in order to create that one perfect build. I can't say if this kind of change is good or bad, but one thing is certain. Final Fantasy XVI is a title that can attract people outside of its traditional fanbase, as it is quite a common criticism that turn-based RPGs are outdated, too complex, and not very beginner-friendly. And though some people, who probably get boners from seeing an Excel spreadsheet, would argue that Final Fantasy lost its roots with this change, I didn't mind the combat personally, as it still managed to offer a decent challenge, without forcing me to write a 50-page log in order to keep track of the sun and moon cycle for every skill in the game. Additional praise goes to the boss fights and how they're orchestrated. From going into the eye of the tornado to fighting an Akon in outer space, Final Fantasy XVI spares no expense when it comes to delivering the most spectacular and over-the-top battles I have seen in quite some time. There's even room for a JoJo reference, and as we know, anything that has a JoJo reference is awesome by default. But what about the story, you may ask?
You cock.
If you want the short version, it is a great story about family, friendship, a battle for the fate of humanity and its place in the world, defying gods and looking out for the little guy, with well-written characters, great pacing, and many memorable encounters. However, any person who has at least some experience with fantasy games, books, and other media would almost instantly see the countless number of cliches that are present in Final Fantasy XVI, from the main hero being the chosen one, to predictable plot twists like the Night Castle raid after a long evening of partying. You know what I'm talking about. The enemies disguise themselves as our allies, enter the castle, and then They run in and cut the throats of everyone inside while our heroes are sleeping. Besides having tons of tropes that almost every dark fantasy title has used at some point, we get questionable naming of the characters, where for every Dion, Benedicta and Annabelle, you get Sid, Mid, Jill and Clive. And I don't have anything against these names, but some of them feel so out of place, or just straight up ridiculous. I mean, who names their daughter Mid? And what kind of medieval lord bears the name Clive? Now, before a dignified medieval expert jumps into the comments section with a long explanation that these names are perfectly fine, I know. Take it easy, man. At the end of the day, none of this really matters in the grand scheme of things. Yes, the story at times is predictable and incredibly cheesy. Yeah, some characters are your typical goody two-shoes and don't really fit in this world where people are mostly looking out for themselves. But it's the brilliant pacing, a solid narrative, a memorable cast of characters, overarching relevant topics that make Final Fantasy XVI such a joy to experience. Sure, if you decompose the story you will see many cracks in its shell, but as a package this game is simply wonderful, and I'm yet to find another title this year that I would enjoy as much as Final Fantasy XVI. For me, storytelling and the overall presentation in Final Fantasy were always more family friendly, with simple good and bad characters. And it shows in this game too, where under a darker, grittier facade lies a classic Square Enix story about fighting for what's right. But this time it felt that the writer's hands were freed from the creative shackles, and they finally got to make a story that doesn't necessarily have to have a happy ending, where you actually see how the consequences of your actions affect the minds of the common people, and where you realize the price of peace. And that's the second Megadeth reference in this video. The side quests are also pretty good and offer a nice change of pace from the grandiose main story, making them the perfect distraction when you need a break from the intense battle for the future of the realm. And though many of them are simply well-presented fetch quests with small fights sprinkled here and there, I still enjoy the ones that I got to do, and I'm thinking about clearing them all in my second playthrough, as not only are they great for leveling up and grinding money, but they also offer more context to the world of Alistia and how it functions on a day-to-day basis. Final Fantasy XVI is an amazing game, especially from a technical standpoint, but it's not only about the graphics and music, it's the great traditional story set in a diverse world oozing personality that make this game one of the best titles that I've played this year. I'm amazed by the incredible attention to detail, the love and care put into the game, and how all of this comes together to deliver a grand experience that many people, including newcomers to the series, will find enjoyable. And though I don't know how well the game will age, but what I can say for sure is that Final Fantasy XVI is a prime example of what happens when you actually give the development team the time they need to make the best possible product. In the current age of meeting release windows in order to appeal to the investors, given almost 7 years to complete development goes a long way towards creating a generation-defining title. And that's my take on Final Fantasy XVI, a well-polished adventure with lots of care and time put into it. If you also got to experience the game, please let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and remember, only play games that are worth your time. See you in the next one. Bye.